What's going on, everybody? This is the Pro Wrestling Wire podcast. Rick Del Santo here, and I am joined by very good friend Broadway Joe Malcolm. Joe, how's it going today?
Fantastic, my brother. How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I'm glad that we finally got to sit down and do this today because I've been wanting to interview you for quite some time, and I know we talked about it quite a bit, but we're finally sitting down here today on and getting this done.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about your youth a little bit. And did you play any kind of sports when you were young?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Being from New York, I played baseball. I played Pop Warner football up to about God, from 8 years old to high school.
Oh, wow.
Um, Wrestled in high school. Played baseball in high school. I was an all around athlete.
Oh, wow. Cool. Cool. What made you, how'd you end up getting involved or interested in professional wrestling, I should say?
Well, that's a funny story. I want to say I was about 8 years old. I'm from New York. We didn't move to Florida till 1976. So I was 8 years old, and this was in the early 70s. And I used to, go to the barbershop with my grandfather, and every time I went there, they had wrestling on, little TV, black and white.
Right.
And one day he puts me up in the chair. I get up in the chair, I get my hair cut, and I'm watching. I think it was Butcher Vachon and Bulldog Browler. I think, and I said I want to do that. It's weird too because when I was a kid growing up in New York, in the neighborhood there were bigger kids, and they also all used to come down to my house, and we had a big front lawn, and they literally used to pick me up and throw me to one another. Literally.
So you were one of the small kids,
I
basically.
was I was one of the small kids, but I thought it was great. I was having a great time, and I'm being thrown from one to the next, like throwing a baseball to one another. It was great. I was always a rough kid. We had this big hill down the street by my house, and I say big hill, and I used to set up a ramp at the bottom, and I used to go up the hill with my bike, my little red bike, no training wheels, and I used to just go all the way down, hit that ramp, and I'd always fall on my ass. I'd come home with knees bleeding and elbows bleeding. Next day, I'd do it again.
Kids don't do that today.
No, kids don't because they got phones and shit. Excuse my.
Yeah. No, you're allowed to swear. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
This is an uncensored show.
Fair enough. This, I curse a lot. Um, but no, back in our day, again, I'm not sure how old you are, but
I
you know,
just turned 50, so
I got you by 11 years.
not too
Back
old.
in my day, we didn't have computers, we didn't have phones, we didn't have beepers. I mean, that stuff, the beepers didn't come out to the 80s.
Right.
And the phones came out, which were expensive. But back in my day, we didn't have any of that. We had to go outside, we had to play. After Saturday morning, mind you, because we had to watch our cartoons like Puff and Stuff, Bananarama, you know, stuff like that these kids can only look up nowadays and see what they were, and a bunch of others. Um, so that's what you know. Watching Bulldog Browler and Butcher Vachon, I think that's what did it. That was the beginning. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. You're talking Saturday mornings, of course, growing up. It was cartoons and then professional wrestling at 10 or 11 o'clock, you know,
Not
sit
not in the 70s, not in
and
the 70s. That didn't start for me. Um, what was it? 1976. We moved to Florida. I
okay.
think 12 years old. And Championship Wrestling from Florida, with Gordon Soley, Mike Graham's group, used to come on from 12 to 1.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, where I lived out there in a little town called Davie, it's a little redneck town incorporated in Fort Lauderdale. That's actually where Nova University is, where the Miami Dolphins, my favorite team, by the way, has their training camp. Um, So yeah, we used to have a field by our house, and all the kids, Andrew, Adam, all those guys wanted to play football, because again, we didn't have phones. We were 12, 13, 12, whatever. And so they'd come to my house, say, let's go play some ball on Saturday. I said 1 o'clock. Why 1 o'clock? I said, because I have to watch championship wrestling from Florida. And I used to, you know, get on the floor right next to the TV, hence the reason why I wear glasses today. I was right in front of the TV watching the matches, Dusty Rhodes, uh, superstar Billy Graham. Hogan wasn't even a thought at that point, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Don Kernoodle, Ron Bass, Blackjack Mulligan, Kevin Sullivan with the purple haze, Mark Lewin. I used to watch all of that. And then 1 o'clock, no problem. I'd get up and we'd go play football. So, and of course, I practiced all the moves on my younger brother. Okay. Um, yeah, that was fun.
So you ended up getting trained by the great Malenko, Boris Malenko. How did that come about, and what made you take that leap into professional wrestling, basically, and meet him, etc.?
Okay. So I was living in Tampa, Florida at the time. I was 17 years old. Hence to say I didn't finish high school because I was 17 and I was working for Toshiba Electronics, Copy Tech, out in Tampa off of Hillsborough Avenue, Hillsborough and Dale Mabry. And I was selling copy machines, little desktop copiers door to door. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was playing semi-pro football for the Tampa Bay Scorpions. I was the youngest starter, mind you. Figure I'd have to throw that plug in. So I really loved football. I didn't forget about wrestling, but now I'm like Mark Gastineau with long hair and defensive player, an inside linebacker. So I played the first year, and then the second year, I turned 18, and I played that year too, and I tried out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I didn't make the team. Well, at that time, my brother had a friend called Ozell Harris, who was being trained by the great Malenko as a professional wrestler over at the West Tampa Boys Club over by MacDill Air Force Base. And I got to meet him and everything. And I said to him, I says, can you introduce me? So he took me over there. I believe it was on Tuesday night. Afternoon nights. I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it was 3 nights a week. So he took me over there. I got to meet Larry, which is his real name, Larry Simon. And it turns out, he's Jewish. And there's not a lot there back then. There wasn't a lot of Jewish people in the business. And I am also Jewish. So we hit it off. He actually, took me under his wing. And remember, before I said I used to practice all these moves on my little brother. So I was already an advanced student before I, had a chance to be trained by him for holds and things like that. So he absolutely let me in the school. I was in the school with two guys that made it in the Florida circuit and in the Southern circuit that have since passed away. They were brothers. One was Mark Starr and the other one was Chris Champion. I was in their class also with a guy named George Barkey, who really never made it, but his brother was a big time wrestler. That was, Dirty Dick Slater. That was
Oh, okay.
his half brother. Let me go digress and say that. And we'll get to that story in a second, as we go on. But so I was, the first thing Malenko would train you, the very first thing was how to get in a ring and
Hmm.
always wipe your feet off before you get in the ring. So, it wasn't like the schools they have today where they do all kinds of roles and this and that. We didn't do stuff like that. Okay. Um, so it teaches you how to get in the ring correctly, how to push the ropes down, blah, blah, blah. Then you sit down, everybody sits down in the middle of the ring and they stretch, butterfly stretches, hurdle stretches, stretch. Okay. Before he taught you any off the rope stuff, any high spots or off the rope stuff, he taught you middle of the ring. He taught you holds, how to do a correct arm drag, and I mean a correct arm drag that you don't see nowadays, off of the lockup. Okay,
Right.
how to do an arm bar off of the lockup. Everything was off of the lockup. How to do a snap mare, off the lockup. So and you had to actually perform those moves with precision before he would go to more moves. All right. Once you've learned that the center of the ring lockup stuff, then we got into lockup, headlock, push back into the ropes, push him off, shoulder block, pancake, leapfrog, arm drag, or backdrop, or something they don't do anymore. I forget what it was called, where the guy would drop to his back and put his legs up, and the guy would come off and lay on his 2 feet, like, and do a flip over. I forget what the name
Right.
of that move is, but being that you watch old school wrestling, I'm sure you've seen it a few times.
Of course, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Tosses, all of that. You know, it was a totally different world than how they train guys now.
Yeah. During that time period at the school, did you interact with Dean and Jody at all?
Okay, so back when I was training,
Hmm.
Joe, Jody, of course, Jody's his real name, but
Right.
um, Jody wasn't really working in the ring at really that much. He was a pharmacist.
Oh, wow.
Okay, something you probably didn't know,
I
but he
did
was
not.
was a pharmacist. Dean, on the other hand, Dean would come a lot. He'd actually come with his pet, which was a raccoon. Okay, his pet raccoon. He would come and he would be in the ring with the raccoon. As a matter of fact, our referee, Frankie Reyes, who still has Malenko School down in Tampa, Florida, outside of Tampa, who is still a good, very close friend of mine, just sent me, and I'll get this to you when I see you. He just sent me a. He made a disc
Hmm.
when Malenko and Bob Orton Jr. Sorry, Bob Roop,
Gotcha.
not
Okay.
Bob Jr. This is way before his time. Bob Roop, okay, who was a big name back in the 60s and 70s. They started two wrestling groups. One was called Global,
Right.
which I went to the Bahamas to wrestle Tyree Pride under a hood, under a mask. And then they had to get me out of there because they wanted to kill me. That's another story for another time. Um, so he sent me a disc, and I watched it on my PS5, and I forgot all about it. I mean, I was in a stable um, with Scotty Williams, sure
Okay.
that name, with Dr.
Yep.
Red Roberts, who was really a psychiatrist, but guy was great, and he played Dr. Red Roberts, the psychiatrist. I was in the stable, and I, it was great. I'm gonna have to send it to you because we were working an angle against the Malenkos, so we were sort of like under Dr. Red Roberts' spell. There was a few of us there. I forget the other one, but oh shit, what was it? Raul Mata or Luis Estea, one of those guys. These
That
these
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Spanish names back in the day, Cyclone Negro.
I remember him. Yeah.
But anyway, all I kept saying, he says, "Okay, Broadway, what do you think of when I say Malenkos?" And I just go for scum, scum, dirt. It was great, and that led up to, also you'll see on this DVD, a tag team match with, I forget who I was with, against Professor Malenko and Dean. So I actually got, wrestled Larry and Dean, what, back in the early '80s, and I forgot all about it, and I've got it on film, and I can't, just to be in the ring, to actually work a match against my teacher, my coach, God, I should say, and his son, who was trained by Carl Gotch, who can tie you up like a pretzel, who who uh, went on as one of the four horsemen.
Right.
It's just amazing to watch myself back when I was 18 years old against them. It's fantastic, and I'll get you the DVD. You got to clean it up a little bit. It's scratchy and this, that, and the other, because of how old you know
Yeah.
it came off of probably a Super 8 camera onto the DVD, so you can only imagine.
Yeah. I've heard of Global, but I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't think I have,
It was
but
short lived.
yeah.
This one here, I think this was Paradise or some. Yeah, you know
Well, there's another one called Sunshine Wrestling. Did you have a chance to work there?
that might
I
have
don't.
been, if
Yeah.
you want, at the end of this podcast, I can. My PS5 is on. I can put it in and turn the screen so you can see what I'm talking.
Yeah.
I,
Right.
it's right there.
Right. Right. So,
Oh,
you mentioned a couple names.
he's big enough for you to see it. Believe me.
Right. Well, you mentioned a couple names there that I had in my notes there, but I want to know is also, did you have any interaction with, say, Rusty Brooks?
Rusty Brooks
Uh,
were very close.
yeah.
Very close. I worked against him, and I worked with him, tag team, and I used to help. He had in see, Malenko was in Tampa, Florida, where his school was, but
Hmm.
Rusty lived down by me in the Plantation, Pembroke Pines, Fort Lauderdale area. Okay, so
Right.
Rusty had a storage unit where he had a ring. All right. It wasn't a big storage, but it had three sides that you could work with. One side you couldn't. So I would go down there with Scotty Williams, would meet us down there, and we'd work in the ring, and we trained some new guys and stuff, new and upcomers. I forget. One or two of them made it big, and I just can't remember their names. And unfortunately, Rusty's not with us, nor is Scotty Williams anymore, nor is Dr. Red Roberts. So, but they were black guys, and they made it big with the NWA. I just can't remember who they were.
Well,
So,
if you think of it, let me know, and then we, at some point, because that's
but yeah,
something
Rusty
I'd like to.
worked
Yeah.
with each other a lot.
Yeah. What about Bob Cook? Because he was trained there too. I
Bob
interviewed Bob about a year
Cook,
ago. He's a great guy.
I never met. I'm friends with him on
No.
Facebook. He's very close with Dean and Joe, with
Yeah.
Frank. I know of him. He knows of me. He was trained by Malenko, but I think it was either the school before mine or the school before that, along with oh God, Jesus, what's his name? The other Jewish guy that played the gimmick that he always got beat. What the heck's his name?
You're not talking
Barry
Oh,
Horowitz.
Barry Horowitz. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he might.
Yes, that was actually the very first interview I ever did for this podcast was Barry, and I got to tell you, he was a hell of a guy. And
He's
I
still in.
think, oh yeah, I met him a couple times in person after that. I think he was kind of skeptical about doing an interview because he didn't know me. But once I mentioned the New Haven Coliseum, he called me on the phone and we had this long hour-long conversation. And
You're
then
lucky. You're lucky he didn't charge you.
no, no,
He
no.
charges for
I
everything.
know he makes. I've seen him at conventions and stuff
Yep.
like that. And yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Anyways, when the Savoldis came down,
Mario Savaldi,
they
good,
used a
good buddy.
for
IC,
ICW. They used
ICW. Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yeah, we had interactions. Mario.
So you and because they used a lot of Malenko guys um in Florida. So did you get a chance to work there for
Well,
him when you
let
came
me
down
go
there?
back for a second because Malenko told all his schoolies, do not tell anybody out there I trained you. At that time, he still had beef with the Grams. He was blackballed. He said, if you tell people that you were trained by Malenko, by me, you won't get a shot. You won't get a push. You're blackballed. It wasn't until Professor Malenko, Larry, passed away, and I think that was what, 96.
Hmm.
It wasn't until he passed away everybody came out with who they were trained with because the blacklist was over, and that's when Dean got into the scene as the Four Horsemen and stuff. Because prior to that, Dean Malenko was not in any of the the territories because his father was still alive.
Right,
Okay, so
right,
I worked with a lot of guys in the '80s for Bill Watts, for Ron and Robert Fuller in Alabama for Southeastern Continental. Um, for Bob Geigel and Bulldog Bob Brown in the Central States. I worked with a lot of guys
right,
out there that we didn't know that we were trained by Malenko. I didn't find that out until late
right.
in life. But I
Oh
actually
wow.
with
Wow.
a lot of guys. Like one of my best friends in the whole world, thank God he's still alive, is Bill Eadie, the mass superstar, or acts
Right.
of demolition, whatever you want to call him. Um, but he had interactions with Malenko in his school. Okay, I didn't know that back
Oh,
then. Had no.
right.
Now, it wasn't until Boris passed away, Larry passed away, that you could finally open your mouth about who you were trained by. And at that point, people would say, I envy you. You were trained by royalty. Mario even
Uh,
said it to me when he found out that I was trained by Malenko.
yeah. Yeah, Mario is a great guy. I
Mario,
interviewed him a long time ago, and he was a very interesting guy. But before
I,
we move
I wish
on,
Malenko, I mean, I wish Mario would have came to the territories. We could have been a great tag team, me and Mario.
tell me about working. You worked Billy Jack and
That
Kendall
was
Windham at
first.
times.
Billy Jack Haynes was my first match for the NWA in Tampa, Florida, for Mike Graham's group, Gordon Soley. Wahoo McDaniel was the booker. Well, I bugged Wahoo down at the Miami Beach Convention Center for months to give me a shot. They did TV taping every Tuesday up in Tampa, Florida, off of Kennedy Avenue, the Sportatorium. Now you hear Sportatorium, you think it's a big building. No, it was a red little schoolhouse. Okay, when you walk in, it was dark and dingy. When you look where the ring is, you had bleachers off to the right and bleachers off to the left. They did 2 weeks of TV. Okay,
Hmm.
so I bugged Wahoo McDaniel. I wanted to put that picture in your mind because we're going to get to why I put that in your mind in a second. So I bugged Wahoo for months to get a shot, get a shot. Finally, he says, "You want a shot? Be up to Tampa at Tuesday." Told me where it was. I said, "I'll be there Tuesday morning. I'll be there." Sure enough, I was there. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in the locker room. I'm getting changed, and you got people like Hector and Chavo Guerrera there. You have people like um, Kendall Windham, Barry Windham's brother, who couldn't wrestle worth and we'll get to that story in a little. That one.
He wasn't that bad, but in his early days, he wasn't the greatest. I mean,
I had
he got better over time.
I had him in his early days when he had
Yeah.
no meat on his body. He dislocated my shoulder with 17 shoulder blocks in one match. That's
Jesus.
another story. Okay. So I show up there, I get dressed, I find out I'm wrestling Billy Jack Haynes. Now, let me just say, Billy Jack Haynes for the Tampa NWA, for the Florida Championship Wrestling, Billy Jack Haynes was called the policeman. Now,
Right.
if you know anything about old school wrestling, they had policemen. They were there and they worked directly for the promoter. And if they didn't like you, you would draw them in the ring. and next thing you know, they're stretching you. They're putting you out of the business because they don't want you there. So now that I got that settled, so I had Billy Jack Haynes my first match. Didn't know anything about policemen. I was green as green can be. All I did was work for outlaw circuit for Malenko, Plant City, Waimama, Bahamas, the small stuff. Okay, what you call indies today, but we still drew
Right.
100.
Back then they were called outlaw mud shows or something like
Well,
that. And now today that's just indies. Yeah.
it was the outlaw circuit. We still
Yeah.
drew from 150 to 200 people per match, not like the
Right.
5, 10, 15 you get now. That being said, so I get in the ring, ding, ding, the bell rings. Me and Billy actually had a really good match. I
Okay.
think I think it went about 12 minutes. Okay. Get out of the ring. Billy won, of course. He went over. We get in the locker room, and I'm taking my boots off. And the first thing he says to me, he says, don't take your boots off because, I didn't know they taped 2 weeks. We got another show coming up. I said, am I on that one too? He said, Wahoo will be here to talk to you shortly. So he's sitting there and he put his arm around me and he says, I just got to tell you something, Broadway. He said, and he explained what a policeman was because Malenko didn't tell us anything about that.
Hmm.
And he says, I was supposed to stretch you in the ring. Now, again, I didn't know what stretching meant either. Okay. This was my first show on the circuit. All right. I was supposed to stretch you. And I says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you bugged Wahoo for months. He gave you a shot just so I could hurt you purposely in the ring and discourage you and put you out of the business. I turned white. I turned white. I said, okay, but why didn't you? Well, why didn't that happen? And this was my first compliment. He says, I wanted to see what you could do before I did that. He says, and I said, and I looked at him, I says, and you could have done it with one hand. He was a big boy. Okay.
Oh yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was a big boy. I wasn't small, but this guy towered me. He said, well, I wanted to see what you could do. And after our lockup, collar and elbow. I know people hate to hear it's called collar and elbow, but that's what it is. You collar and the elbow. After our lockup, I felt how soft you were. I wanted to give you a chance. And he says, I actually had a great match with you. He says, keep working on it and you're going to be something in this business. And I says, well, aren't you going to catch some heat from Wahoo? He said, I already dealt with that. Don't worry. And
Let me ask.
Wahoo came over, and I think my next match was against Kevin Sullivan in the Purple Haze, where they pile drive me into a chair. And at that point, I wasn't discerned whether I was a baby face or a heel. So after
Mhm.
that, all the baby faces came out, and carried me back. And I had Hector Guerrero on one side, Chavo Guerrero on the other. And just to tell you real quick, so they're carrying me back there, and I'm trying to sell my neck because I was pile drived into a chair. And Hector said, now Hector's a jokester. He was always a
Mhm.
jokester. He was a ribber. And I didn't know any of these guys. I knew of them watching them on TV, but I never met anybody. Remember, this is
Right.
a shot. And so you got Hector up by my hip, and you got Chavo on the other side. And Hector goes, yeah, Broadway, you're not selling it. You're not selling. All of a sudden, he took his finger and stuck it right up my ass. And I fucking let out a howl. He goes, now that's how to sell. I'll never forget that. That's, oh, geez. The first time anything ever and never since has been up there, pal.
That's hilarious. Tell me about meeting Mike Jackson. Did he get you booked in the Southeastern Territory?
Okay, so yeah, I love him to death. He's still around.
He's
I
still
talked
competing. Yeah.
to months.
Yeah.
He wants to do a convention or whatever. If I have anything for him down here, he's all right. So I met Mike Jackson in Tampa, Florida, for Mike Graham's group, and I didn't know what to do at that point. How many territories there were, or how to get around to the territories, or who to talk to. So I actually hooked up with Mike Jackson and Randy Barber, roast beef.
Okay. I
Oh,
remember him. Yeah.
so I met him, and then he says, why don't you come to Alabama? You'll stay with Randy and his wife. And there's also another wrestler there, Jimmy Backlund, who later became Jimmy Del Rey.
Yep.
Um, you'll stay, and we go to Southeastern, and in Birmingham to wrestle for Ron and Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden, and then we go up to Bill Watts. Back then it was Mid South before it
Hmm.
became UWF, and we also go to Atlanta for the Crocketts, and they're basically doing jobs. Okay,
Right.
they were
Yep.
a traveling job show, paid well. Okay, I think I was getting 250 a match in 1983. That was good money, cash.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
Of course, they were getting more than that. Mike was keeping some of it and whatever for trans, what have you. So yeah, that's how I met Mike Jackson. And it's funny because we were doing the Crockett's, and we were doing Alabama, we were doing Mid South, and then all of a sudden, Jackson comes to me and he says, "Go grab your suitcase," because we were in my car and Randy Barber's car, and he says, "Make sure you've got your suitcase." I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're not coming back with us." And I says, "I still don't understand what you mean." And this was at the Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana, where where Bill Watts did his TV taping before he went to Oklahoma City to do TV at the Tulsa Fairgrounds. So he says, "Well, Bill just bought your contract. You work for Mid South now." And I was so happy. Let me tell you why. Not because I was working for a big show, probably actually the biggest territory in the business, but because the booker there was Dirty Dick Slater. And
Mhm.
I had an in because I trained with his brother. And first thing I did when I got there, and before they bought my thing, the first show I did for them with Mike Jackson, I went up to Slater and I said, "Excuse me, sir," because again, I'm a newbie. I was real polite and I said, "I just want to tell you that your half brother." Oh, well, I didn't even say half brother. I says, "Your brother George Barkey wanted me to say hello," and he looked at me and says, "How do you know George?" He's the only one in the business that knew I was trained by Malenko at that point, because I said I trained with him over at whose place, and he shook his head, smiled with that weird grin, and he kind of like took me under his wing, because everybody said in the business, and I still hear it now to this day, that Slater was one of the toughest guys in the business. You didn't mess with him; he'd beat your ass. He'd swing on you. He was worse than Austin. Okay, Slater was a true badass. All right. And I never had issues with him. Even when Buzz Sawyer came to the territory, became very close with Buzz. I helped train his Rottweiler He-Man. I know his wife. I knew his kids. But I'm getting off the subject. So I think that had something to do with Watts buying my contract, because I worked with Slater's brother, and it's like, I don't know if it kind of felt like home or what, but that was the start of Mid South. Which, as soon as I got there, they changed over to UWF, and I'll never forget, Rick Steiner, as you call him, was not Rick Steiner at that time. He was Robert Rick Steiner, because that's his name.
Right.
They
I
shortened
remember I've
later.
I've seen some of his matches using that name. Yeah.
Well, that was in the early days, because I was there the day that they changed over to UWF. And being that I was new, I didn't get this, but Watts gave Robert Rick Steiner a UWF duffel bag. I was standing right there. So at that point, it was no longer Mid South. I guess the deal with his ex partner, I forget his name, um, just Bill bought him out.
Did you ended up working for the Fullers as well, right? Correct? And
Robert
well,
Jimmy Golden out Southeastern Continental.
Yeah, what was it like? What was it like ultimately working there? Because working, I mean, Continental is one of those groups. I don't think it gets enough recognition in history these days. And there's plenty of times I'll go sit up here on YouTube and just watch a ton and ton of Continental for an evening. You know what I mean? It's probably one of my favorite territories that just still today doesn't get enough recognition.
What people don't really know about Continental is one of the owners was Bob the Bullet Armstrong.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
but a lot of people don't know that fact. They thought it was Ron and Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden, but Armstrong was a very, very big part of that territory. I
Yep.
enjoyed it. I mean, we did our TV taping at Boutwell Auditorium out in Birmingham, Alabama. That was the first time I wrestled Tommy Wildfire Rich. I wasn't even supposed to wrestle that night. It was supposed to be a guy by the name of oh God, Bullet Bob or something, or I can't even.
Bullet Bob was Bob
No,
Armstrong.
no, Bob
Yeah.
Brown,
Oh,
Bob Brown,
okay, gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
he didn't show up. So I had to take his place, and instead of calling me my name, Broadway Joe, I was Bob Brown during that match against Tommy Wildfire Rich. He was there with his cousin Johnny, although I only wrestled one of them. But I mean, it was great. Brickhouse Brown was there. Adrian Street was there with his wife. Austin Idol was
Hmm.
there. I mean,
Was Doug Furness there during that time period? Because I know he did uh, well, I wouldn't say a short stint, but I guess he got his kind of start there, and then he went out over to WCW for a little bit, and then he made it huge in Japan, and then, did some ECW and WWF
I
stuff in
don't
the later 90s, but you don't remember him
I
being
don't
there?
recognize that name. No,
No? Okay.
no.
Uh,
He went under a different name when he was there.
no. No, it was Doug Furness during that pretty much his whole career, I believe. Um, Sadly, we lost him a number of years ago. After I believe after he retired. But did you ever interact with Jim Crockett during time down there at all, working for him?
Well, yeah, I worked with the Crockett's, but when you say
Yeah.
interact, it wasn't like you were
Uh,
talking now.
no, I mean, did you ever get to meet him, have a conversation, anything like that? Like, what was that like with
Jim,
talking to Jim?
Shivani, all of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were down to earth, great guys. I mean, they weren't like business, like Vince, a bully. They were down to earth. They talked to you like a human being. I mean, really, they didn't have really much to do with the wrestling angle of it, other than commentating, like a Gordon Soley. And by the way, Gordon Soley was Southeastern Continental's commentator as well.
Yep.
I could
Yeah.
take a story about that with Gordon at another time.
He's the greatest of all time. Let's just say that. All right.
I loved him to death. He didn't like me one day because of a prank, a rib I pulled on him. He was a very happily married man, and I could have got him jacked up, but we're not going to go there right now.
So obviously on WTBS, I came across some matches of yours for working on WTBS Studios, Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA. What was it like working with both of those gentlemen?
Well, Tully Blanchard was and still is a great guy. I mean, I, he was down to earth as well. He wasn't. He didn't have egos like they have nowadays in the indies. Okay,
Mhm.
he was a good. Most of the guys, pretty much all 90% of the guys were great.
Mhm.
Okay, the egos. Well, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to start mentioning names, but um, I had a great match with him. The problem with that match, if you saw the match, I love Baby Doll to death, but she had no clue how to do a working slap. Okay, her gimmick back then was, to slap the wrestlers, the opponents, and stuff. So at that point, you know, I had my head out. I'm down on the ground, and I had my head out of the ring, and she hauled off and she slapped me. And I'll tell you what, it was a real freaking slap. I had welts on my face for 2 weeks. Now, of course, back then the gimmick, his finish was the slingshot suplex, and that's if you watch the match, that's how he beat me.
Yes. Yeah.
Magnum TA, on the other hand, Magnum TA he was quiet. He was a nice guy, but he was getting a major push. And of course, this is before his motorcycle accident, but yeah, he was getting a major push, and this was on TV. So I believe, and his finish was the belly to belly.
Hmm.
Okay. And I
Yep.
believe that match lasted what, 17 to 20 seconds. When I see him at meet and greets, um, uh, 2 years ago, I saw him, man. We talked about it. He laughed his ass off. Yeah, that was a 20-second belly to belly. I got a few little Fernums in there, but it wasn't going long.
Uh, what do you remember about working with Pork Chop Cash at all?
Pork chop cash. I worked so much with him out for Bill.
Yeah,
And let me just digress for 1 second. When I
sure.
was there, the Mid South territory was Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We called that
Right.
loop.
Hmm.
They kept adding cities, like Mississippi. We do the Jackson, Mississippi Fairgrounds out there, and a couple of other little. And Louisiana, we did, all over Louisiana and Texas. We do Texarkana, which I didn't mention. That was one of them. Houston, Texas, at the Sam Houston Coliseum. Then, a few of us like Murdoch, me, Tommy Gilbert, Eddie Gilbert's dad, Buzz Sawyer, Dick Slater. We go to Gillies and drink. But anyway, drink rodeo cooled Coors beer, by the way. That's got to be piss warm. Murdoch, anyway. But what was your question?
Working with Pork Chop Cash because
Pork
you seem
chop
to work
cash.
with him
Yeah.
quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did. Well, Pork chop cash and Mad Dog Boyd were the
Yes.
Bruce brothers. And I tag teamed against them with Ricky Starr. I tag teamed against them with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Pork Chop was so easy to work with. Mad Dog Boyd was a little stiff, but Pork Chop Cash was so easy to work with. And they were so funny. It was kind of hard to keep. Now, again, I was a heel back then. It's kind of hard to keep a straight face with the looks he'd give you and the swagger that he would do. It was kind of like when I wrestled the Pork Chop man, Rufus Freight Train Jones, kind of similar. They had those looks, they had those moves, they had those hands. It was amazing. The guy was a superb worker.
He seemed to go everywhere too, because
Oh,
I remember him doing jobs in WWF and WCW, and then he'd be in some random uh indie. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, he seemed to go everywhere, anywhere and everywhere.
yep, yep. The
Yeah.
guy was amazing, man. Back when I wrestled him, I was still a young buck. He was aged,
Yeah.
and he would still take those bumps.
Yeah. I mean, wrestling was way different then.
Oh,
With guys that age would still go out there
look, I'm
and
61 and I'm trying to get Mario to put his tights on and go up against me.
he retired a while ago. I
I
was there.
know,
I was there, but
but
I mean, you're coming out of retirement at some point, yeah?
I am with Pure Vanguard. I'm working. I'm managing the guy for Doc, Angel Santiago,
Yeah.
uh, and I just turned him heel, and I'm working up to maybe in a couple months.
I got about a few more questions and to ask you that you also teamed with Gustavo Mendoza on TV.
Gustavo Mendoza.
You took
Didn't
on the Fantastics, and then I believe you took on Al Perez and Brett Sawyer at one point as well. Was there, the option to keep you guys together? I mean, and what was it like working with, say, the Fantastics, the Bobby Fulton, Tommy Rogers? Of course, Al Perez is legendary. He doesn't do a lot these days. And Brett Sawyer, we lost, I think it was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
I spoke to him, and 2 weeks later he died.
Yeah,
Still have
I was
I
getting
still
ready to
have
interview him, and then he passed.
I still have his phone number on my phone from our last time we talked.
Wow.
Yeah, oh yeah, I won't get rid of
Yeah.
that. Brett Sawyer and me, granted, he was a baby face, I was a heel. We had a lot of matches for Bill Watts. As a matter of fact, we got in trouble at Bill Watts' territory because we were in Oklahoma. we were at the Excelsior Hotel, and it was New Year's Eve. And I think we were both, and it shouldn't have been this way because Bill Watts sent out a memo. Heels have to stay in a separate hotel than baby faces. They cannot be at the same hotel. They can't be seen together, what have you. So it was New Year's, and I was on the fourth floor, and he was on the fourth floor. We were like three doors down from each other. And, you know, it was New Year's. We were all drinking, and I had a woman, he had a woman, and, you know, all of a sudden I get a phone call to my room. Now, I don't know if you're going to want to edit this out, but I'm going to tell you anyway. He says, "What are you doing, brother?" I says, "Yeah, I'm just laying here with so-and-so." He says, "Yeah, me too. Let's, what room are you in?" I told him. He says, "Okay, I'm right down the hall." He says, "Let's meet in the hallway and do a little Fernum." Back then, we did a lot of Fernum, Durham. You know, the kayfabe was still big. There's no such thing as it anymore because, you know, everybody knows about the business. But back then, they didn't. So it was kayfabe. So I went in the hallway, he went in the hallway, and we had like a little match, sort of, you know, lock up. You know, we acted like, you know, we hated each other and this, that, and the other. And then we kind of swapped women and went back into the room. So, yeah, it was, I loved him to death, you know, plus his brother Buzz was a very, very good friend of mine. Um,
Yeah.
but, and who was the other one? Oh,
Uh,
Gustavo Mendoza.
and the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton, Tommy Rogers.
Right. Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, they really didn't talk much except in the ring about the match because back then we only knew the last 2 minutes of our match, who was going
Right.
in the last 2 minutes. The promoter would go over the finish. Well, people say, well, they rehearse it nowadays. Well, we didn't. We talked everything out in the ring. Every time we locked up, it looked like we're talking tough, but we're talking what our next move is going to be. Nothing was preempted because once the adrenaline starts flowing when you're wrestling for 10, 15, 30,000 people, you're not going to remember half that match. So
Right.
we talked it all out there. Nowadays, they write it down, they practice, say this, please. If you can't remember 12 minutes, you get out of the business. I'm sorry, get out of the business. But regardless, everything was different then, big time.
Yeah.
But they were good guys. I mean, I got nothing bad to say about them. They were quiet. It wasn't like they socialized. They came into the locker room. They got their match. They did what they did, and they left.
Yeah.
Mendoza, on the other hand, that son of a gun didn't speak a word of English.
Really.
He was actually my roommate. We were living in Alexandria, Louisiana. I was staying at Leroy's Motel. Oh, what a flea bag that place was. Right on the main strip. And Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert was living in Pineville, which is the next town over, at these little apartments. His father, Tommy, was living above him. But Eddie was leaving because I think at that time he was dating Missy, and I think they were going to get married or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
he asked me, he says, "You want to take over the apartment?" I said, "Sure." So me and Mendoza moved into the apartment. Tommy, his dad, was living above us. And I mean, I was only there for maybe a month or two, and then I moved to Red Stick, Baton Rouge, where, you know, the Centroplex was, the big arena, and close to
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans, where the University of New Orleans arena and stuff like that, where we worked. But Mendoza didn't. It was kind of hard to converse with him. And then when we'd go to do TV taping in Oklahoma, we'd stay at Tulsa. We always stayed at the La Quinta Hotel. I'm not sure if that was off of Highway 285, 265, something like that. But he would room with me there. So he was a good guy. But you couldn't really talk to him because he couldn't speak English.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Also in Mid South, you got to wrestle a young Steve Doll. Do you remember this at all? By your reaction, I'm guessing yes.
oh, I remember Steve.
Yeah. How did this go?
He was an airhead.
Yeah.
He was an air. The match went fine.
Yeah.
Couple of mistakes, you know, I covered up, you know,
Yeah.
but I think he was young at that.
Yeah,
He
this
was
must have been probably what 86, 87, something like that, and
I think it
he
was
didn't really make.
I think it was
What's
80
that?
I think it was 87.
Okay, he didn't really get his stride until like probably like the mid '90s, early to mid '90s, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, yeah, he was young. I think he came out of Texas. If I'm not
yeah, maybe, yeah.
and out there for if he was with world class, he might have gotten a slight push, but they beat you up out there a little bit.
Did you ever have a chance to work in there for Fritz?
A short stint, yeah, not
Yeah,
too. Same thing with NWA in Portland, Oregon, for Stu Bob o, was it Bob
you got it
Owens?
right. It's Bob Owen. Yeah,
Yeah, a short stint. I mean, it wasn't anything to write home about or anything
right.
like that. My main territories was Florida, um, NWA, Alabama, and
Hmm.
Mid South and Kansas City. I mean, I
Right.
stayed the longest, though. But again, there was a lot of territories to jump to
Yes.
once you learn who was who and what is what. Um, one guy I wish I would have wrestled. God rest his soul. I mean, I did get to wrestle Rufus Freight Train Jones, whose son was Slick. Guy was fantastic. Still is. Guy's fantastic. That was Slick's father. But I was also out there with Harley Race, but I never got to work.
Hmm.
Never got to work it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So when did you retire?
Technically, I haven't.
So you still haven't. So I mean,
I mean, I took a sabbatical,
yeah.
but I, as you see from September, I got in the ring, took my bumps.
Yes, you
You
definitely did. Yes.
bet.
We're talking about Pure Vanguard Wrestling in Bristol, Connecticut. What brought you to Connecticut? Of all places, what the
Well,
hell did you move to
no,
Connecticut for?
we're actually talking about the United States Wrestling Federation and
Yeah,
Cross Promotion Pure Guard at the Musquamacket Beach Fall Fest,
correct. Oh, that's right. That's right. That was
September
August.
13th.
Was it? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
all right, all right. I'm getting my
you were
dates
there.
mixed up. I know I was. You can hear the golden voice on commentary all on YouTube, just for the record,
I mean,
everybody.
you sent me the matches, so I
Yeah.
have proof you were there. Okay.
There's pictures of me too. I for some reason I was thinking August, but yeah, now I remember September 13th that you said it, and that was a fun time. So yeah,
It was a great show. We're gonna do it
yeah,
again.
good, good. Well, so like I said, what brought you to Connecticut of all places?
Well, I met a woman down in Florida, and she was
Yeah.
moving up here, so I hopped on my motorcycle and pulled into Westerly, Rhode Island, in the middle of winter, riding a bike. Um, I, and I've been here in 2000 what is it? December 22nd, 2013, and I've been here ever since.
I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, the woman, fine, but the
Oh no, longer,
Connecticut.
we're, we're
Oh,
we're no longer together.
got you, got you.
I
I'm
mean,
just saying, I've been a Connecticut person my whole entire life, and I'm
hey,
looking to get the hell out.
hey, I got two ex-wives in Florida. This one at least lasted 12 years.
Good.
You know what they say? It's hard to stay married to a professional wrestler.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
Andy Colley used to say that.
Yeah, legendary. The original Demolition Smash as well, by the way. For people
Well,
that
he
might not know that.
was also one of the Moondogs,
Yep,
as
absolutely.
well as the Nightmare.
Yes. Let me ask you, so you also actually promoted under the name USWF in the 1990s. You brought it back not so long ago as well. So tell me about the deciding to promote shows and what brought you to that.
What in the 90s?
Did you say, yeah, what you
Well,
decided that you formed the USWF in where did you form it and when what brought you
19,
to like what made you decide to start promoting shows?
okay, so I started at the end of 1995 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, suburb
Okay.
outside Atlanta. So for about 2 years, I was working for Danny Dees, who owned North Georgia Wrestling Alliance (NGWA), and we were going all over the state of what's called Georgia. We had people like Bill Eadie, was on the shows. Tommy Wildfire Rich was on the shows. Um, a couple of other, names that Randy Colley was on the show as the Nightmare. So I worked with them, and then my brother-in-law at the time, he came into some money. He says, "Why don't you start up your own business?" Blah blah blah. So I says, "You know what? I'll give it a shot." So I started up United States Wrestling Federation, and our first show was at the National, and we did National Guard Armories, is what we did back then. Our first show was at the Winder, Georgia National Guard Armory, and I had Carl Fergie come down as one of my referees, King Carl, my buddy. I had Ronnie West, who was a promoter, who's no longer with us. He was at the show. I had Big Van Vader, Leon White. He was there. I had Tommy Wildfire Rich. I had Bill Eadie. I had Randy Colley. I had a couple of other names. And, of course, I was on the show as the bounty hunter. I think I have one of those cards from Winder, Georgia. I'll get you. I think that one only has Tommy Rich's name on it. And then we did Eatonton, Georgia. I mean, I bought my ring from Len Denton, the grappler. God rest his soul. I bought. He had a knife.
He's still with us.
Oh, see, I thought Len died.
No, he put out a book a couple years ago. He's actually did a signing not that long ago, and he appeared on a buddy's podcast. Not so like probably within the last year. Yeah, you should read his book. It's phenomenal book.
I'm gonna have to reach out to him because I mean, all I got to do is contact Juanita Timms.
He's on Facebook, so Len is.
I thought he passed away.
No, he's still there.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to reach out to him because I go way back with Len when I was leaving Continental Southeastern to go to work for Bill out in at UWF. The woman that I was seeing, Connie Glass, us wrestlers, we like to find a woman, in each state so we have a place to live, pretty much. I'm not telling you anything that hasn't already been said on a podcast or whatever. And Connie Glass and me were a thing, while I was in Birmingham. When I was somewhere else, it was somebody else, but I was living with her. And then when I left, who moved in? Linden.
So why don't you tell everybody else what you're up to today? Like you said, you're managing the Puerto Rican Prince, right? And Angel Santiago.
For Pure Vanguard Wrestling. Yep. I'm also the owner of United States Wrestling Federation. I mean, aside from that, my real job is I'm a general sales manager of a retail car dealership out in West Warwick, Rhode Island.
That sounds like a blast.
It is, and I'm just enjoying life.
Thank you for coming by and sitting here for the last hour.
I got a lot more stuff to tell you at another time if you want to have me back on again. We didn't even cover even hit the surface, bro.
Absolutely.